The biggest thing I learned from Johnny is he's a lunatic. Like that bloke,
Yeah.
he'll kick for hours. But there's a reason like even when I was part of the 2003 team, I was on the bench when he kicked that field goal with his right foot.
Probably want to ask you, like, what's your relationship with goal kicking been over the years? I was watching a video, and the video was titled "Matt Giteau cost Australia the match against Scotland." So
Oh yeah,
you've
I know that one.
you've you've clearly had some ups and downs, which every good goal kicker has. Like, what is your relationship with goal kicking?
Yeah, well, mate, I think actually that next week we played Wales. Our first kick from the halfway and kicked it over. But then my next two, it was always on that left hand side for whatever reason. In that two of the left hand side, I was struggling with, and I had two from the left hand side, missed both those. So I was like, oh, here we go, we're back into it. But I suppose it's just having like a consistent process. As far as my relationship with goal kicking, like I love to kick.
Yeah,
I
awesome.
enjoy it. It's almost like golf, Like I think obviously I'm more consistent with my kicking than I am with golf, but it's just that same kind of mental battle that you can go through sometimes. Um, yeah, I think the biggest thing is just having a process and being pretty strict on that process and what you do. I feel like my style is a little different to other people, and we had a coach come in, could have been
Mm.
2011, Brahm, South African kicking coach that Robbie Jeans was using. And he tried to change my style and have us all kicking the same way. And automatically I didn't like that just because I don't feel I don't feel comfortable doing that. And as a kicker, when you're setting up in your run up and you can see the ball and approach and you get that feel of confidence, like you're like, okay, I'm in my rhythm, I feel good. And he tried to change my technique too much and I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my relationship. Yeah, I mean, I love goal kicking. Obviously, it's a big pressure environment especially once you get to big matches. But I think the more reps you do, um, and the more consistent that you strike in the ball, especially during training. For me, I don't worry too much about the end result. It's more about my process, my connection with the ball, and actually my shape and how I felt with that. And more often than not,
Mm.
it'll go where you aim. But if it doesn't, say it's a windy day and you're kicking into the wind and you hit it and it doesn't go through the post, but you still feel fine with that connection, that's good enough for me. And I think that's just come through experience. The longer you're doing
Yeah.
it, whereas when I'd first start out, I'm kicking in the breeze. I'm just going, what is going wrong here? I try and change things and move it around. And then by the time you get to the weekend, you've switched your routine up that much that you don't have that confidence and feel comfortable doing that. So I think that just comes with experience. And as I said, earlier, getting that footage recording and having that mental picture already in my head of a good strike and how I felt and how I looked through that is easier for me to then replicate it the next time once I've actually seen it. So I think visual cues for me are great as well.
And also, I'm sure you would have kicked as a young fella, and then when you start getting into professional environments and a shitload of eyeballs looking at you, like I reckon, I almost don't agree with just treat it like a practice pitch and just like you're down at the field by yourself because it is a bit different. There's more people, there's
Yep.
pressure, there's refs, yeah. So, was there anyone that's helped with your mental game with goal kicking? But then also, how did you get better in big games, more eyeballs, more crowds?
Uh, well, I think that you get your confidence throughout the week for me, like your Monday to Friday. And then once you hit Saturday, it is what it is. Like you're kicking, what do you like? There's nothing else you can do other than believe in your process and believe in the reps that you've done. So for me, it's just almost game day. Once you get there, it's just even with when you're about to play, you're just like, we're ready to go. Like, let's go. Like, same with goal kicking. Oh, here's a penalty. Sweet. I want to take this one. And you just feel
Yeah.
confident because you've done the work throughout the week. Um,
Did you
I
have
like,
anything that you did in game that like a try scored? Now you've got the ball, you've got your tee. What was kind of that mental switch that you had to get into process thinking?
I like to play games. And even Eddie Jones, which I thought was a really good touch when I first came in the Wallabies, even though I wasn't the goal kicker, there was potential that I could be kicking. But he'd go, okay, penalty here, you're taking the shot. Berkey's gone off, mate. And then you've got all the boys around you in a training
Yeah,
field and you've got to make that kick. That's as big as pressure as you'll get. That's more than actually on the weekend. because you're going to get shit straight away off the boys if you don't hit it. Whereas on the weekend, it's almost like it doesn't matter, next job mentality, unless it's the final kick of the game. So I liked that, making competitions, almost kicking with other kickers as well, putting something on the line that means something. So then you get those nerves and you're like, hey, I've got to settle, worry about my breathing. Breathing's big for me, I think. If I'm able to get my deep breaths in, shows how relaxed I am. And then you're just in your normal calm zone. It's when you're breathing quick that it's almost like, oh shit, like you just got to slow that down. So breathing has always been a big cue for mine. And then throughout the week, trying to get competitions in. But I really did like when Eddie Jones, I hated it when he did it, but I liked it because on the weekend, the pressure was less, even if that makes sense, because during the week, if you miss in front of the boys, especially in those sitters, or he'll say, penalty here, kick here, like, you've got to make it. So I think those things, trying to replicate the game while it's not actually game time, helps you get used to the nerves and then be able to perform through them and just trust your process, I suppose.
Yeah. And the teams you've been in, you would have had some kicking sessions with some pretty quality players. I'm sure a few kicks with Jonny. And who are what is some of the stuff you picked up from Wilkinson, and then also other kickers that you've worked with and kicked with?
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest thing I learned from Jonny is he's a lunatic. Like that bloke,
Yeah.
he'll kick for hours. But there's a reason even when I was part of the 2003 team, I was on the bench when he kicked that field goal with his right foot. Everyone was like, oh, that's jammy, that's lucky. But after playing with him, it would have been more lucky actually if he missed. He does that much work and it's just second nature for him. So that kind of helps that loss sit a little better. But he, I think probably the one that I really liked with Jonny is you set the tee out 5 meters in front of the goalpost. And so you're in front of the goalpost, you've got the crossbar across there, 5 meters out, and you've just got to hit it. Go back, get your routine, you've got to hit it. It's always got to go under. So it just gets you in that mindset. And that's how I warm up if you've got like a net and that behind. But that's how I'd warm up, just to stay through the ball and stay in the kick as long as possible. And if you're hitting that easy, move it back to 6 meters, go to 7 meters, like just getting used to hitting, until you find your range when you're actually going to hit over or you bang straight into the crossbar. But always find that a really good warming up technique.
So if you're popping the ball and the ball's going high, what is that telling you?
Well, you're getting out of the kick quick, you're getting under it. You're not kicking through it. You're not staying long. Like you're just trying to stay engaged and make the kick last as long as possible. I think with if you're jamming them, it's almost like if you get there and it's chippy, you've probably not hit it with the right part, but you're also worried about the result too quick. So it's almost like you've hit it and then you head straight up like that. With Jonny, another good tip was he would always kick it, and then he wants to stay in the kick as long as possible, and then he'll see it out the corner of his eye. Never see it with both eyes. So that is a good cue for him to stay in it, now catch it, and then you'll see it at the back end through that area. So it was almost, as a left footer, that's how we go, whereas a right footer, obviously, he had quite a tight angle on his kicks as well. But, yeah, there's just a couple of cues like that I've just learnt from him. The biggest one being that repetition, it's like anything. There's so many talented people in the world, but it's not just that he's lucky and he's talented. Like, he works hard at it. DC would be the same, these people are naturally gifted kickers, but the reason that they're world class, or looked at as one of the best ever to perform on the international stage, is just through repetition. Like, it's not lucky. Like, they're just you work hard, and it's a skill like anything else. Being able to pass consistently, hit your mark, do your basics well. Kicking's exactly the same, as you know.
Yeah. Any other coaches that stand out for you kicking coaching wise?
Benny Perkins. Benny Perkins was one that he was a kicking coach of John Eales and Elton Flatley very early on in Queensland. He would just call me the gunslinger. He thought the way that I did it was almost like a gunslinging motion, but he was just more on feel. He's like, deep breaths, feel your legs, kind of just, so you're shifting your mindset from the kick. I mean, looking at it now, but it's just like, feel your legs. Okay, feel your legs, like that's what you're focusing on, how your legs feeling. And deep breaths was his big one, and it just, allowed me to not overthink a kick. I always know if I hit a bit of grass or you don't hit the ball as clean as possible, I'm probably thinking too much rather than just trusting the process and getting into the kick, if that makes sense. But yeah, so Benny Perkins was great. And we'd often start with even 30 metres out, just a couple of drop punts, just to get that ball going through, just loosening up your legs and letting your legs take over. That was a big one for him. Let your legs take over, Dynamite. He used to call me Dynamite. And then when you get it there, you go, the gunslinger. But he was good because he wasn't so technical. It was just all on feel. So that was probably the best that I was ever hitting him, probably 2004 on the end of season tour. I think when we lost Elton Flatley and I was goal kicking a lot, I was hitting the ball pretty sweetly then.
What's that that thing when you're at the back of your approach, you're on quite a body angle, like you sort of turned in a little bit, almost closed off to the ball. What's that about?
Closed off the ball, you mean as in like this right shoulder would be more open and to the sideline? It's just for me that angle. I find like it's how I've always kicked, on like a sharper angle, and it's just being able, I don't know, I just feel comfortable there. Whereas if you try and straighten me up like Brahm did, try to get me straight, approaching the ball almost like a drop punt, I don't know, I just don't feel, I feel like I'm just not hitting it the same way. I really like to come on a bit of a tighter angle, but it's also my finishing point won't be straight through at the goalpost. I know if I stay committed and gone through it, I may skip. So if I'm facing this way for the post, and that's where normally most kickers will finish up, I'll finish a little bit over here because that's where my angle is, but I still stay true in the ball. And then the lean is just almost just so that I don't sit back on the ball, because I had a tendency at times to lean back and try and guide it through, almost like a soccer kick, where you're leaning back on your heels a bit more and you're just touching the ball through, which would often give it a bit of a tail because you're not staying through the ball. That was my biggest thing about leaning forward and keeping it's almost like you got to build that momentum, as and make sure that if you're leaning forward rather than just stop, and then you try and kick it really quick, you're just using your hip power and you never hit it sweetly. Roughly, I mean, there may be one every 3 that you'll hit sweetly or how you want it, but I don't think it's as consistent as, once you're trying to build your run up and get a bit of momentum into the ball.
Yeah. And what I love about that answer is you've tried things, you've felt things out, you know your reason why I do things this way. I tried that and that had this effect. Like, that experiment is what I really encourage kickers to get to, is I can ask a question about your ball setup, your approach, what you're doing and your follow through, and you can have a good answer because of all the experimenting. I love that stuff. What was going on with the kicking tee, the cone, the field cone with the medical tape strapped on, kicking tee on the top? What's going on with that tee?
Oh, way back, yeah. Well, I had a lot of groin trouble at the time. So the one that I had before was too low, but I liked the way that I could position the ball on that tee. So that's where I used to put the cone there just to give me a little bit more height, so I didn't have to dip down and put as much stress on my groin. I think that was more. It would also give me a little bit more distance too. So it was just it was just that, and then you experiment, try different tees. Now I found, I think it's called the Wolf. Is that the one?
Yeah.
With rugby bricks there, the Wolf, the name of it. And that one's at a really nice height for me. And I feel like I get consistency. I'm able to lean it however I choose on that tee, and it grips and sits well. So, yeah, my one, it's just more to take the stress off the groin once I've lifted the height around that time.